depression, behavior disorders, ADHD, autism, Alzheimer's, all linked to imbalances in our biochemistry that can be rectified with proper nutrients and supplementation. Why are we not told this? This was a very sad read for me, as I have 2 children diagnosed with autism. My main objective is to get everybody to take ownership of their lives. And in this modern day, I believe that we have every single thing we need at our disposal to solve every single one of our problems. But we have to remember the institutions we are looking to give us the support, security, and protection that we want do not have our best interest at heart. GPs, governments, and big pharma are playing a game that has not worked at the cost of our lives, and we have paid them for it. We listen to people tell us all the time we need to work harder and sleep less. And if we're sleeping 8 hours a day, we're not going to be as successful as those that work 4 and 6. My answer is let them win. Your health should be your priority. Welcome to the 7th episode of the Clive Experiment. This week is our health special. Inspired in our book of the week, Nutritional Power, by William Walsh. We're going to talk about the prescription scandal as I continue to dig into the failings of the NHS. Later on in the episode, we discuss why I believe the National Health Service should be privatised, and why the government should implement the National Health Scheme, an insurance-based service where the government covers every single member of the country with a set amount every year. In my weekly excerpt, You're Responsible for Your Health, we're going to look into and discuss the importance of sleep. So without further ado, let's begin. Nutrient Power. Nutrient Power is this week's book of the week. It's a 7-hour read. However, it did take me another 3 hours because I had to reread certain sections because I found them particularly hard to digest or comprehend. Not being a medical person, I don't particularly think this book is geared towards the average layman, because there is a lot of terminology and words that I didn't particularly understand that required further investigation, and I still haven't finished investigating all the words or all the techniques that were discussed in the book. However, I don't want to take away the importance of reading books like this, especially if you or any member of your family is severely affected by any of the conditions that are mentioned above. Nutrient Power. Heal Your Biochemistry, Heal Your Brain is a book written by William J. Walsh, a researcher and clinician in the field of biochemistry and nutrition. The book was published in 2012. In Nutrient Power, Walsh argues that many psychiatric and neurological disorders, including depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, and autism, are all caused by imbalances in biochemistry. They can be corrected through proper nutrition and supplementation. He claims that conventional psychiatric treatments such as antidepressants and psychotics are not effective in treating the underlying biochemical imbalances, and they may even make them worse. Walsh outlines his theory of biochemical individuality, which suggests that each person's biochemistry is unique and requires a personalized approach to nutrition and supplementation. He explains how imbalances in biochemistry can be caused by various factors including genetics, environment, diet, and stress, and presents case studies of patients who have recovered from psychiatric and neurological disorders through proper nutrition and supplementation. All in all, this book took 7 hours to read, and my key takeaways are: the author argues that autism is caused by imbalances in biochemistry, and that these imbalances can be corrected through proper nutrition and supplementation. According to Walsh, the root cause of autism is a deficiency in essential nutrients such as B vitamins, minerals, and amino acids that are critical for normal brain development and function. Walsh presents case studies of individuals with autism who have improved their symptoms through an approach of nutrition and supplementation. He also provides a very detailed protocol for testing and treatment of biochemical imbalances in individuals with autism. The protocol includes recommendations for nutrient supplementation, dietary changes, and avoiding certain food triggers. While there is evidence to support the idea of nutrition and supplementation can improve symptoms of autism, the concept of autism being caused by solely deficiencies in nutrients is not supported by current scientific research. However, being a father of 2 diagnosed autistic boys, one high functioning and the other severely affected by the condition, I have contacted our family GP asking about the availability of these tests. I feel that this is the most hopeful bit of information I have seen since I began my investigations into the condition. I have already started preparations to switch the family's diet to a gluten-free and casein-free diet, and the introduction of specified supplements prior to testing. It is going to be hard, but I think it is important to see if any improvements can be gained. Identifying opportunities like this is exactly the reason I started this project of reading 1 book a week. Will we see any improvements made in the future? I hope so. But until then, we will see if any improvements are made in the future. And hopefully, I'll be doing a video on the results. Again, the author puts together a very well presented look at how nutrients and supplementation can help benefit people from these life-changing disorders. If it is as simple as it states, why has this not been offered to parents or those that are suffering from these conditions? Why do GPs and the like all turn to the easy prescription medications? Now, like all books written by scientists, there is always more than one way to look at a situation. So I take that this book has been written from a particular perspective, and although the author lays out great bits of evidence for each of these conditions, there is other science that is contrary to what he says. Whenever I come across information like this, I'm always mindful to try and keep an open mind so that I can make the best decisions I possibly can for my health and my family's. Now, being a person who has 2 children who suffer from ASD, one high functioning and the other one very affected by the condition, the author discusses simple things that can be done to potentially improve some of the author discusses some easy things that can be done to improve some of the elements of the condition. So after reading this book, I decided that I was going to put my family on a gluten-free, casein-free diet for 6 months to see if any of the symptoms that my youngest son particularly suffers from are improved. Additionally, we'll be moving straight onto a broad range supplement that covers the required nutrients discussed in this book. So we're also going to put our child onto the required nutrients. We're also going to put our children onto the required supplements that were outlined in this book, and contact our GP to see if we can get any of the tests that he discusses in the book. Again, this is one of the biggest reasons why I started this project. If I can find solutions to my problems and solve my problems, if I can find solutions to my problems and my family's problems, and I can share those solutions with others to potentially help them solve their problems, then this is exactly what the objective of all of this is. So over the next 6 months, hopefully these trials will go well, and I'll have something I can report back, a personal experience to a change. But also at the same time, if there isn't, it's not a negative. But by identifying possibilities and opportunities to make a change is everything that I'm looking for from this project. So as we continue this journey of health, we need to look at the main industry that our health in the UK is based around, and that is the NHS. And today I'm going to discuss the NHS and the scandal of prescription drugs. GPs have been paid to prescribe ineffective drugs. Now, I don't believe the GPs have done this intentionally. I believe this is a data and point of view issue. I believe some GPs find life incredibly easy just to prescribe a prescription pill to get an issue within a tolerance and to say that's okay. After I discuss these topics, I want you to think about how did we get here and who is it benefit or who does it benefit? NHS and the scandal of prescription drugs. GPs are paid to prescribe ineffective drugs. Did you know that up to a fifth of an average GP salary is effectively commission on drugs? On the basis they decrease the NHS's disease burden and cost. However, the proverbial shit is hitting the fan because a 10-year study has revealed that a vast increase in drug spending has done nothing at all to decrease NHS costs. To put it into numbers, 30 billion has been spent rewarding GPs for prescribing drugs that have proven close to useless. That money comes from our taxes. Britain has conducted the largest ever uncontrolled public health experiment, which ran for 15 years. It cost taxpayers 30 billion and found no benefit. The expectation was that it would save up to 30,000 lives, cut admissions to hospitals, and increase life expectancy, therefore reducing costs to the NHS. The NHS started paying GPs for checking biomarkers such as blood glucose, triglycerides, and cholesterol, and then prescribing drugs to bring them down if they were over the official healthy level. They even got rewarded for identifying obese patients but did nothing about it. In just 15 years, the number of prescriptions written by GPs has gone up 3 times. A rise which is implicated in a 75% increase in hospital admissions for adverse drug reactions between 1999 and 2008. The majority of these are elderly because they are more likely to be diagnosed needing treatment. As we age, markers of ill health such as cholesterol and blood pressure naturally rise, as well as being more likely to suffer the ill effects because their resilience naturally decreases. Cost saving of 15 million to 70 million. From 2000 to 2010, statin prescriptions went from 15 million to 70 million with no evidence of benefit for the elderly. Despite their widespread use, evidence for the effectiveness of statins in the elderly remains unclear. So far, the only clinical trials in Britain that have specifically examined the drug's effects in the elderly found that men were just 1% less likely to have a fatal heart attack. Blood pressure pills emerged a bit more effective, treating 2,400 people will prevent 50 strokes, which makes it worthwhile, but there are no fewer deaths, most likely because of the rate of damaging side effects associated with the drugs. The current medical practice of fetishizing numerical goals for blood pressure and the like has led to an onslaught of drug treatments aimed to bring people aged 60 and older in line with some 30 and 40-year-olds. The shocking truth is the NHS is guilty of a terrible betrayal to our elderly. People who have trusted their doctors without question their entire lives. Between 1995 and 2010, the proportion of UK adults getting 5 or more drugs doubled to 20%. 10 years ago, a year-long study on nursing homes. 10 years ago, a year-long study on 100 nursing homes found patients that stopped 320 of their drugs cut the yearly mortality rate from 45% to 21% and dropped hospital admissions from 30% to 11%. A better result achieved by any drug treatment anyway. Now, 40% of adults aged 65 and over take 5 or more prescriptions. Now, 40% of adults aged 65 and over take 5 or more prescription medication. Adverse drug reactions have been estimated to be the 4th leading cause of death in hospitals and are responsible for more than 700,000 hospital visits each year. 17% of adults were prescribed antidepressants in 2017 and 2018. These cases were concentrated in the poorest parts of northern England. The NHS spent 168 million on drugs containing the active ingredient sertraline. Painkillers cost the NHS in England 442 million per year. There were almost 700 deaths from high-strength pills like tramadol, codeine, and oxycyclone in England and in Wales in 2019, compared with fewer than 350 deaths 10 years ago. I believe the objective where GPs were going to use prescription drugs to reduce the burden on the NHS was made with good intentions. However, it's taken 20 years for us to identify that these prescription pills have done nothing but to increase the NHS's costs and put effectively 30 billion in the pockets of those prescribing the drugs. That money comes from our taxes. To feel like we were part of an experiment, that our loved ones were part of experiments, doesn't sit well with me. Every time a government institution takes on an objective, it's never done well. I believe it's done with all the right intentions, but I don't believe they ever do it well, for the simple reason is there is no obvious financial reason for it to be a success. So it doesn't become important. And the idea of a experiment to take 15 years to identify that it was ineffective and actually resulted in more lives being lost, and resulted in doctors doing tests on patients, and rather than trying to push them to change their lifestyle or educating them or just giving them an option, saying, your blood pressure level is very high. These are holistic things you can do to reduce your blood pressure. Exercise, diet, cold water exposure. There's loads of holistic things that we can do to improve our bodies. And it puts the onus back on us. I think if somebody's going with an issue and they're going to the GP, and the GP is saying you need to go and do these healthier things, that is more beneficial to the country and to that person than for a GP to write a prescription for a drug that magically fixes something but causes another problem. However, GPs are getting rewarded for doing tests, identifying whether people are obese or not, and then leaving them and not helping them, or identifying that people have high blood pressure and diabetes and not helping them change their lifestyle. And at the same time, GPs might say, well, people don't go home and do it. They don't follow the diet. They don't change their ways. They don't try and improve their lives. Well, if that's the case, then the GP is not at fault, and it's the person that's not doing these things. The whole nation shouldn't have to pay for people who can't look after their own health. Because when we need it, when we're actually sick, there is no availability because we're focused on a minority within the system. Increasing the amount of drugs has actually ended up resulting in a 75% increase in admissions for adverse drug reactions between the years of 1999 and 2008. Things can only be worse now in 2023. The problem is it's our elderly that are suffering because they're the ones that have the markers of ill health. They're the ones with blood pressure and cholesterol issues. They're also most likely to suffer the effects of ill health because their resilience naturally declines. Prescription pills went from costing the government 15 million to costing the government 70 million with no evidence of benefiting our elderly. Recently, I think the system has gotten so corrupt where people believe the only solution is prescription pills, where the marketing and the manipulations done by big pharma and by doctors and how they use doctors to prescribe these drugs that obviously have clear benefits but are not the solution. They're just a continuous cost that keeps increasing. My point is, and this is the most important takeaway I have from this experiment, from this research, is essentially we're not helping people. We're not saving money. We're not saving lives. We're actually making people less healthy by simply prescribing pills for every condition from when you're 40 or when you're 30 all the way up to retirement age, and then even more when you're retired, stops people from looking after themselves throughout their life. And I'm not talking about every disease here. I'm only talking about the lifestyle affected diseases. And we know these are lifestyle diseases because we have the blue zones. The blue zones or the 5 zones around the world where people live on average to 100. Numerous research done on these people, and they've identified the key most important things to a healthy, strong population. These are the things we should be pushing forward as solutions. They cost the government no money. We need to educate people. Educating people and identifying and showing them where they're going wrong, and then holding them to account. If people choose not to look after themselves, they choose not to look after themselves. And that's at their cost. That's at their detriment. We can't babysit every single person. And this is what all this research tells me. It tells me things are being sugar-coated. And we are being manipulated into believing a system works well. And I can't identify why. I can't identify why we're allowing it to happen. Why the people in power are allowing it to happen. Between 1995 and 2010, the proportion of UK adults getting 5 or more drugs doubled to 20%. 10 years ago, they did a year-long study on 100 nursing homes, and they identified that by stopping 320 of their drugs, they cut the yearly mortality rate from 45% to 21%. In that same year, hospital admissions dropped from 30% to 11%. Why weren't those learnings used? Why didn't we take what we learned from those learnings and apply it to keep those people alive longer? Now, 40% of UK adults over the age of 65 have 5 or more prescription medications assigned to their name. The adverse reactions from drugs is estimated to be in the 4th leading cause of deaths in hospitals and resulting in more than 700,000 hospital visits a year. Our GPs, our health service has become a pill dispensary. 17% of adults were prescribed antidepressants in 2017. The NHS spent 168 million on drugs containing the active ingredient sertraline. Painkillers cost the NHS 442 million every year, with every year almost 700 people dying from high-strength pain pills like tramadol and codeine and oxycycline. 10 years ago, only 350 people were dying. The math is not good. So why is it happening? Why is the NHS continuing on this path? Why is the NHS continuing on this path? It is clear drugs aren't working, as well as Big Pharma claim they do. There is a major issue within the NHS and other health services all around the world. The USA being probably one of the worst. Big Pharma are probably the biggest sham industry since the snake oil salesman of the olden days. It is time to start thinking about these systems as broken. We need to stop trying to save them and start trying to figure out why they're not working and solving those issues. And that brings me to my belief. And again, this is a pretty controversial belief. I'm not looking to cause any unrest within anybody's livelihoods. However, I believe the NHS is a broken system and it should be privatised. But at the same time, when I say the NHS should be privatised, I still believe there should be a national health scheme, which would be an insurance-based system which ensured the entire population of the country received the best possible healthcare the country can afford. And I'll break it down what I believe, just so you can understand. Implementation of a government-funded insurance system should exist in tandem with private medical services. Under this system, citizens would be guaranteed limited coverage by the government. People would have the option to seek treatment from private providers within the allocation of their personally managed scheme. This balance between public and private healthcare would lead to a more efficient and cost-effective system overall. To ensure citizens prioritize their health and take personal responsibility, healthcare insurance coverage should be capped at a certain amount. Allocations for doctors, health screenings, optometry, dentistry, and prescriptions would all be provided each year, with a non-capped carryover system in place, as protection for those years when health is just not at optimal levels. The system would incentivize individuals to manage their health by offering bonuses and perks for healthy behavior. Private companies would be responsible for managing doctors' practices and hospitals, and this would ensure maximum efficiency of these services as they would be paid per patient seen. It is time to stop penalizing the entire country for the few people who can't look after themselves. Everyone gets sick eventually. However, the current system does not look after those who really need it, as it is filled with hypochondriacs and self-harmers and those who don't look after their bodies. So as we look into the NHS funding, it is clear from this slide here, right, let's look into NHS funding. 22% of the country's money goes on the NHS. That means there's 22% of every single receipt that the country has goes on the NHS. The budget for the NHS is 230 billion. The UK population is 68,772,834. At the time I'd got the data. That means the cost per citizen is £3,344 and some change. That's how much each person in the country would contribute to the NHS. Nationally, GPs are paid on average £155.46 per registered patient. That means, of that 230 billion, 10.6 billion or 10.7 billion goes to GPs. I believe this is a substandard service provided by the GPs, and I believe it could be better. On average, in the UK, any member of the UK population goes to the doctor 7 times a year. Now, just stop and think about that for 1 minute. When was the last time you went to the doctor? Last month? Last year? How many times do you go to the doctor a year? And in the last 10 years, how many times have you been to the doctor? I'll start. I've been to the doctor for myself personally. I've been to the doctor 7 times. That means somebody else or some other people have used my other visits. If on average we're going to the doctor 7 times a year, that equates to 481 million appointments. For argument's sake, imagine the GPs in the UK were private. At £50 a consultation, GPs would take 24 billion. Now I believe that is the true cost to deliver the service I believe we should all be getting. I believe GPs are underpaid for the work they do. But at the same time, I believe the UK population are not taking ownership for their own health because it's far too easy to just go to the doctor. Because there's no cap, there's no allocation, it's just unlimited. Now, what if the NHS was privatised and the government had a scheme, and let's say you could go to the doctor 3 times a year? I still think 3 times a year is a reasonable amount. That would then essentially cost the country 10.3 billion, which is almost 400 million cheaper than they currently pay now. But the service would be at private doctors' standards. And this is why I'm talking about privatising the NHS. This is why I believe the privatisation would improve the services within our country, but still having a national health scheme, which means all the private doctors are still paid by a government-controlled insurance. which means they can go in and set the prices at a fair exchange. And with the statistics they have, they can calculate exactly how much they can afford each year. As I dig into the NHS, I'm continuously hit in the face by massive inadequacies. And you see these inadequacies only in government-run institutions. You look at the communist countries like Russia and China, this is the level of bureaucratic failure you only see in socialist communist countries. The NHS is losing money, up to 7.6 billion a year, on stupid stuff. 300 million on hospital administration. 432 million on management consultant. 1 billion on doctors not following their NICE standards. Unjustified price hikes in medication, 1 billion. Paying over the odds for simple consumables like toilet roll and latex gloves, 2 billion. And most recently, wasting 40 billion a year on diversity staff. That's enough for an extra 1,200 nurses. Remember, every dead pensioner is one less pensioner to pay. And I truly believe the NHS and the government are not doing their best for the pensioners and are overlooking the statistics because it's convenient. It's good for the books. That might be incorrect. That's just a deduction I've made. That's my own personal opinion. I believe the NHS and the government are overlooking these failures, especially with our elderly, because it balances the books. And that's why I believe the implementation of a national health scheme would be a much more beneficial way to manage our country's medical needs. Imagine if each citizen got £150 worth of doctor's visits a year, but that £150 would carry over every year they don't use it. So the first year you would have 150. If you look after your health and you don't go to the doctor, the next year you've got 300. And then by the time when you get to 60, you really need to go to the doctor more often because you have actual ailments and actual issues. You have a huge amount of money. But by ensuring people prioritize their health and restricting the amount they can go to the doctor, it make people think twice about just going to the doctor. And by having people's prescriptions controlled out of their pot, will make people think twice about going, yeah, I'll take that medication. Yeah, I don't really need it. I'll just take it. It doesn't cost me anything. Or £7 in the shop. I don't care. £7 is nothing. Or when you're retired, it's free. Or if you live in Scotland, it's free. Imagine it came out of your allocation every year and you just saw your allocation coming down because you were wasting money. There's loads of ways we can change the way the country runs its health system. And by doing these changes, we can save the country a lot of money. And at the same time, we can force people to take ownership of their lives. And secondly, we can ensure that the system works more effectively, more cost effectively. We need to stop penalizing the entire country for a few people that can't look after themselves. We need to make sure that the service is there at a set standard for every single individual in the country, whether you earn 1 million a year or whether you're on benefits. Everybody in the country should be entitled to a set minimum amount of coverage. And that should be dictated by the amount the country produces. We should always set it to a percentage of our domestic receipts. And that is the most fair and the only way we can run a system in a cost-effective manner that ensures there is always something there for every man, woman, child of this country. Now, every week I talk about the things we can do to improve our health. And my question this week is, do you get enough good quality? There is no end to the amount of people that tell you that you snooze, you lose. If you sleep too much, you're not working enough. And this is now embedded in our culture. I used to fall prey to this. I used to work 16, 18-hour days when I was at my peak of my career. And even then, I was like, I'm not working hard enough. I need to do more. I need to climb more. I need to achieve more. And it wasn't until I started prioritizing my health that I realized that I was absolutely causing myself more harm than good. There is a well-established culture that associates sleep with laziness and inactivity. And some of the great entrepreneur or hustler entrepreneurs out there see sleep as a barrier to your success. However, sleep deprivation can lead to a decrease in productivity. It can also damage cognitive function and make it harder to focus, think clearly, and make decisions. Additionally, sleep is essential for repairing and rejuvenating the body, reducing stress and relieving anxiety. What happens? What happens when we don't sleep enough? What happens to our bodies when we don't sleep enough? Now, again, researching into sleep has only just recently started becoming a priority for me. I have earmarked a few books to read on this subject, and later on we'll be delving deeper into why sleep is so important and how to get enough. And I guess what I have to say from my personal experience is I always try and prioritize 8 hours of sleep. However, it is incredibly hard to achieve that. Life has a way of getting in the way of that. Most good TV shows start at 9 o'clock. Or most of us finish and finally get the kids to bed at 8 o'clock and you feel like you just want to have a couple of hours of being an adult. Or we tell ourselves that that's the only time we have, so we stay up as long as we can. Now, I totally understand this. I live in the real world. I have the same struggles. I have the same arguments with my wife. She'll want to stay up and watch a movie, and I'll be like, no, I've got to get up at 6, so I need to go to bed at 10 so I can get my 8 hours. But again, I've conditioned myself to want that sleep. I don't like missing that sleep, and I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything if I'm not sleeping. It's taken me a long time to get that mindset. But I believe it's a very healthy and positive mindset, and I try and implement the mindset in my son, who is at that 12-year-old age now where he never wants to go to bed. Always feels like he's missing out on something because he has to go to sleep. And I have to tell him all the time that it's my job as his parent to prioritize his sleep over everything else. And I know he doesn't like what I always have to say about it. Sleep is so important. You know, sleeping 8 hours a day is considered one of the most important things to improve and promote our physical and mental health. You know, during sleep, our body physically restores itself. You know, our minds, you know, download and store and shape the information from the day that we've learned from the day. And anybody who is continuously learning and trying to achieve new stuff, sleep is an important part of embedding that knowledge. Not only is sleep so good for us and it's so important, there's certain things that only happen while we're asleep. And these various body protocols are important because they're probably the reason why most people are getting dementia and Alzheimer's and all these other cognitive disorders in later life. And that brings me to the end of this week's episode. I've likely touched on a lot of different subjects relating to our health in this episode. All I want to achieve from this is to get people to start asking the questions and start thinking things out for themselves. If we educate ourselves, we read about our chronic diseases, we research our issues, and we identify the issues we can change in our life to improve these conditions. You know, make nutrition and lifestyle changes that are required to make our lives better. Stop taking the easy route and just taking drugs. We need to start saying no to drugs and realizing that the drugs that we have been prescribed by our doctors are ineffective. And the only thing that's really effective is the important nutritional and lifestyle changes that are needed to prioritize our health. The food and lifestyle choices we make could be our medicine of the future, and they cost nothing. We need to stop and look at the potentials and start thinking about who is trying to manipulate us into doing these things? And why do we look to them? We're in an age where all the information we need is literally at our fingertips. Every one of us has a smartphone. Every single one of us has the ability to search the information you need. Every single one of us has the ability to book out a book from the library and read a subject. There is no excuse not to educate ourselves. And there's no excuse to start thinking that every single one of our issues can be solved by us. Stop looking to government and big business and GPs and all these other positions of authority to solve our problems. Every single problem can be solved by you. And 90% of our health problems can be solved by improving our food, improving our nutrition, increasing our exercise, and changing the way we live. And that is the main lesson from this week's episode, is we need to start thinking about the good changes we can make to make our lives better. Because nobody else is going to come and make things better for us. We have to do it. We have to take ownership, and we have to make the world and our lives a better place to live in. So until next week, thanks for watching.